Good evening and welcome to this council meeting of March 16th. If you could please rise if you are able and pay attention to Councilman Neil Goldberg for the invocation to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor. We're pleased to have with us tonight Susan Zuber-Chall. Susan is currently a chaplain for the Topeka Police Department and has been in that position for the past 2 years. Susan teaches at Emporia State University, criminal justice classes, and she has been there for 15 plus years. She's a member of Temple Beth Shalom in Topeka, has held numerous positions in the temple. Also a former member of the Peace and Justice Center, Interfaith of Topeka Human Relations Commission, NAACP, former board member, and District 501 Citizens Advisory Council. Help me in welcoming Susan Zuber-Chall. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I would like to know if you could bow your heads for a prayer. May it be your will, our God and God of our ancestors, that you lead us in peace. We invite you to preside over the city council meeting. Even if members have different opinions, give them a unity of spirit. Aid us all in listening to each other's points of view without rancor. Support this body, God, to work as a cohesive group, putting aside their own agendas and combining all ideas in order to aid the community of Topeka. Assist this organization in helping to discover new ways, God, to approach challenges, and bless the work of all our hearts and minds, and may our deeds merit honor for you. Through the light of your presence, God, let there be a spirit of camaraderie in this room, so all can work together on a shared mission of governing the people who depend upon this gathering, and let us say, Amen.
Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this point in time, we move on to the roll call.
Mayor De La Isla,
Here.
Council Members Hiller,
Here.
Valdivia Acala,
Here.
Ortiz,
Here.
Emerson,
Here.
Padilla,
Here.
Nager,
Here.
Dobler,
Here.
Duncan,
Here.
and Lester.
Here.
We have 10 present.
We now move on to the proclamation. Deputy Mayor Padilla, do you happen to have that with you?
I do.
And if so, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to, on behalf of the mayor, read this following proclamation. By the mayor, whereas people with a developmental disability for all racial, ethnic, educational, social, and economic backgrounds, and all are valued members of society who find fulfillment living everyday lives, and whereas we value what is important to people with disabilities and their families who are striving for everyday lives no different than that of all other citizens. And whereas people with developmental disabilities deserve equal opportunities to enjoy, participate in, and contribute to their local communities alongside their neighbors without disabilities. And whereas early intervention, education, employment, home and community-based services continue to be vital to enabling citizens with a developmental disability to enjoy the rights of citizenship and to participate in the life of our community. And whereas the city of Topeka is committed to recognizing that every person, regardless of perceived ability, has valuable strengths, infinite capacity to learn and to make decisions, and the capability to make important contributions to their communities if given opportunities to do so. And whereas the city is therefore committed to encouraging communities and other support structures to promote higher expectations and self-determination for individuals with disabilities. And whereas Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month is an appropriate time to recognize the City of Topeka's public policy accomplishments concerning persons with disabilities, and to also identify improvements to the public policy that facilitate full inclusion to Topeka citizens with developmental disabilities and their families. Now, therefore, on behalf of Michelle DeLace, the mayor of the city of Topeka, Kansas, to proclaim the month of March 2021 as Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month in the city of Topeka, Kansas. Congratulations. I'm glad you're here with us. Would either of you like to speak?
I would.
My dear people, it is so honored to be with you tonight. I am so privileged. Everything you guys have done for me. I will do all my vows and my prayers every night and day. And I am so happy, and I thank you from bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Please watch your step.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Such a gentleman. We will now proceed to the appointments, if the clerk could read.
A is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Angelique Brown to the Topeka Human Relations Commission to fill an unexpired term ending January 31, 2023. B is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Kyle Mead to the Topeka Housing Authority Advisory Board to fill an unexpired term ending December 31, 2024. And C is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Leilani Gray to the Topeka Sustainability Advisory Board for a term ending February 28, 2023.
You have heard the consent agenda. What is the pleasure of the body? The mayor does not have a vote.
Move approval.
Councilman Dobler moves approval. Councilwoman Nager seconds. Comments or questions with regards to these appointments? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Council members Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
and Emerson.
Yes.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
We now move on to the consent agenda, if the clerk would read.
We have people here, Mike.
Yeah, we have 2 appointees here, Mayor.
To those appointees, thank you so much for being present today. We appreciate your service to our community, and we thank you for making time to be here at the council meeting. Thank you very much.
Mayor, I think we have a couple here. Thank you.
All right, now we move on to the consent agenda. May the clerk read.
A are minutes of the regular meeting of March 9, 2021, and there are no applications.
Questions or comments from the council body? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was reading the minutes and it kind of bothered me. I was going to let it go, but it just kind of bothered me that it said in there that the people in the chamber said the Pledge of Allegiance. And I just wanted to point that out, that everybody said the point of Pledge of Allegiance, not only those in the chamber, everybody. So if we can correct that, God forbid, I'd hate for Brenda to point that out to somebody that I didn't say the Pledge of Allegiance while I was Zooming. So that's the only correction I'd like to make. With that, I'd like to make the correction and adopt the corrected minutes.
We have a motion with an amendment to the agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
Councilwoman Hiller seconds. Do we have additional comments or questions? Okay, at this point in time, a vote would not only be a vote to approve the consent agenda, but also an amendment to the minutes. At this point in time, we proceed with the vote.
Council members Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Oh, yes.
Emerson,
I'm also skeptical, but I will vote yes.
and Padilla.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
All right, we now are moving into the action items. Action item A, if the clerk would read.
A is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout authorizing and providing for the issuance of $35,070,000 aggregate principal amount of general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2021A, and $2,735,000 aggregate principal amount of general obligation bonds, Series 2021B zoo projects of the City of Topeka, Kansas, providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal of and interest on said bonds as they become due, authorizing certain other documents and actions in connection therewith, and making certain covenants with respect thereto.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, Jessica Lemondola worked with Jeff White and Kevin Cowan to conduct the sale of GO bonds for the zoo capital project financing and the refinancing opportunity that was mentioned in the reading of the item. I'll let Jessica tell you more about our sale today. Jessica?
Thank you, City Manager. So today's sale deal went really well. So it's very exciting because any savings we can achieve, we obviously can put right back into infrastructure and other projects. So today is a great day for us. And I just want to point out that developing the team and the disclosure documents necessary to put on a sale like this, especially outside of our normal deal date, is quite an intense process. So I just really want to thank city staff, including Rochelle in my office, who does a lot of the heavy lifting, and then also Kaylin and Jeff with Capital and Kevin Cowan with Gilmore and Bell. We have a great team, and that teamwork today, I think, really paid off. I'll, at this point, I think, hand it over to Kaylin, if that's all right, and he can give you the full rundown of the numbers.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. This is Kaylin Dwyer with Columbia Capital Management. The ordinance and resolution in front of you this evening relates to two bonds that were auctioned this morning. As Jessica said, the results were very successful. The bonds were very well received. The city first sold a single series of $5 million in bonds, Series 2028 tax-exempt bonds. These were sold to refinance for economic savings the city's Series 2015A bonds issued in 2015. The city also, secondly, sold a second series of taxable bonds, the Series 2020B bonds, to fund certain zoo improvement projects pursuant to the city's recently adopted agreement between the city and Friends of the Topeka Zoo. Just to reiterate, like Jessica said, the auctions this morning were very successful. The two transactions attracted 10 and 7 bids respectively, which may very well be a record for the city. It's rare we hit double digits like we did for the 2028B bond or 2028 bonds. So if it's happened, it probably predates me, and it's rare that it happens for any client. So a lot of demand for the city's bonds out there. It probably has a lot to do with the state of the market. New issuance volume is down, but in any event, getting 10 bids in any market is a pretty sure way of ensuring that you get the best possible cost of funds. So as you can see from the summary chart, the winning bid for the 2015 bonds came in at about 0.90%. That's less than 1%, 0.90% for 15-year money. By comparison, the bonds we refunded accrue interest at a rate of about 3.1%. So the result is significant cost savings to the city on that $35 million. In total, you're looking at about cost savings of $3.7 million or $250,000 annually over each of those 15 years. On a present value basis, equating the cash flows over time to today's dollars, that amounts to about 3.5 million, or 9% of the amount of principal that can be funded. So very big saving, very great result. The 2021B bonds, as I mentioned, the smaller issue, about 2.8 million were issued. We structured those improvements with level debt service over 7 years. That comes to about $425,000 annually for each of those 7 years, and produces total debt service over the life of that loan of right at $3 million, which one interesting perspective here is that the total debt service saved from the economic refunding exceeds the debt service on the new bonds issued for the zoo. So one important, I think, perspective to have here on that. In all, just to conclude, very successful bond pricing this morning. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
I have to say, today was a grand slam for the city of Topeka in savings. Wow. Great job, team. Great job. Thank you. Thank you so much for your guys' work. Comments or questions for the team? Aside from, is there anything else that we can refine?
Actually, yeah, maybe, I think maybe this fall there might be, so.
Okay, good.
Find out.
Okay, it seems that everybody is pleased. There's no questions that I see. Okay, there is no questions. What is the pleasure of the body?
Move for approval?
We have a motion for approval by Councilwoman Nager. We have a second by Councilman Emerson. Comments or questions for our team? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Councilmembers Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
and Nager.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
We now move on to item B, if the clerk agreed.
B is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trapp prescribing the form and details of authorizing and directing the sale and delivery of $35,700,000 aggregate principal amount of general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2021A, and $2,735,000 aggregate principal amount of general obligation bond, Series 2021B, zoo projects of the City of Topeka, Kansas, previously authorized by ordinance of the issuer, making certain covenants and agreements to provide for the payment and the security thereof, and authorizing certain other documents and actions connected therewith.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. This is simply put the second component necessary in order for us to sell the bond. So this is our next step in order to complete this process.
What is the pleasure of the body?
Move approval.
Second.
Councilman Dobler moves approval. Do we have a second? Deputy Mayor Padilla seconds. Comments or questions for our team? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Councilmembers Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
and Dobler.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Wonderful. We now move on to item C, budget if the clerk agreed.
C is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout establishing the city's 2022 budget priorities.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We have discussed the budget priorities at a previous meeting and feel that they are ready to be considered for approval, and we request that approval for tonight if possible.
We do have one person signed up for public comment before we enter discussion. Mr. Ledbetter, if you could please approach the dais.
Evening, governing body. I know I spoke on this a couple weeks ago, but one of the things that I will continue to say on the record, I'd like to see the wordage, the verbiage of enhanced productivity of staff and resources. And we keep leaving those kinds of words out. They're not just buzzwords. They actually tell the staff, look into enhancing productivity, which means doing more with less people. That's what productivity means. On number 2, commitment to developing neighborhoods, the greatest thing you could do to help our neighborhoods is enforce codes. And that includes on the commercial properties that are in and around neighborhoods. And I keep seeing us miss that point. I'd like to see more of a priority, even in these written statements, about that. On number 4, it would be nice when we're talking about quality of life to talk about having a clean city. Of course, that gets back to code enforcement, but even businesses that are operating around town, you'll see a lot of litter. I mean, I would just like to see a better attitude, and it starts with the governing body saying, hey, this is what we'd like to see. And, you know, I think under quality of life, you definitely should include Parks and Rec. And even though it's not part of the city, you also include a number of things in this paragraph that aren't necessarily part of the city as well. But Parks and Rec is part of the city. Those neighborhoods are part of your neighborhoods. And we need to make sure that we're communicating to the county. We want those Parks and Rec properly funded, especially those neighborhood parks. They do listen, but sometimes you've got to speak. And so that's what I started doing on Parks and Rec Advisory, was speaking about these neighborhood parks. And we're seeing some progress, but we can always have more. It never hurts to have the city say that this is important to us. On improving fiscal sustainability, one of the things I'd like to see is anytime there's a rate increase of any kind, I'd like to see at least 60 days notice given to the public and a discussion about that before it ever comes before this body. I also have, over the years, especially the past 3 years, seen a lot of items brought forward to the council that seem to have maybe thousands of moving parts, and you only have a week to look at it. I would never tolerate that. I think you as board of directors have got to stand up and say, we're not going to do that anymore. We need time to examine these things, to do our fiduciary duty, to do our due diligence. We cannot be examining multi-million-dollar projects with just a week's notice or 2 weeks' notice. You need a lot of time to see these things. And I think, furthermore, your staff, and I know some of them will respond to and some may not, they've got to be very open to answering your questions. And I think emails are really good. That way they put it in writing. But that's just my suggestion. One more thing I'd like to see is I want to make sure that in the future when we're doing contracts or any kind of contract over $50,000, that we're following bid procedures and making sure that we have that transparency where all that money is going, and that many people are noticed and many people are allowed to bid that are good contractors or able to do those jobs. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ledbetter. Governing body, you have heard a discussion from the public, and this is a discussion item that we've been talking about for a while. Do you have any comments or questions before we take any action? Councilwoman Heller.
Thank you, Mayor. I made one comment when we had our discussion session on this, and I would like to bring it forward, and that is on the very last line of the last section, where in the section on improving sustainability, on line 71, it says, make strategic funding decisions based on 5-year, long-term impacts. I would like to recommend that we substitute "and" for the comma. I don't want there to be any misunderstanding that long-term impacts are looking forward 10, 20, even 50 years as we make our decisions. And so if I'm not sure if there are any other comments, I'm happy to make that motion as part of approving the ordinance. Again, just one change. Insert the word "and" in line 71 so that it says 5-year and long-term impacts. I've talked about it with the city manager, and he's okay with it unless he...
We're good. We're good.
He's okay with it.
Councilwoman Ortiz seconds that amendment. And approval. Councilman Dobler, additional comments.
You suggest keeping the comma or removing the comma?
Removing the comma
Thank you.
instead of the comma. Okay.
Councilman Duncan,
Be clear, will this be a separate amendment or included with approval? Because I have something
including approval.
I would like to discuss before we move to approve.
Well, then I'm happy to have it just be an amendment.
Okay.
If you have another amendment,
Yeah,
certainly.
I do.
Okay.
Okay, so Councilwoman Ortiz, you second this. This is now just an amendment discussion. Okay. So at this point in time, we have one amendment made to the document, and so that we can keep track of the amendments, we would proceed by voting on this amendment so that we have an amended document to continue discussing.
Council members Lesser,
Yes.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
and Duncan.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Okay, we have an amended document. Councilman Duncan, you wanted to make some additional amendments.
Yeah, I just have one thing I would like to see us add to this document. I know that's a slippery slope. You don't want it to get so big it's untenable. But if you look at past budget priorities, there was one thing that we accomplished 1A of it, but we're still working on 1B that I'd like to see included. And then under the section of, what is it, continuing a commitment to developing neighborhoods, I would like to move that we add a line that is continue to work towards funding the Housing Trust Fund. Like I said, we've accomplished 1A of that mission by creating it, and that's been great. And I know staff is working hard and going to bring us some stuff to fund it. But I think that's been such a big focus of discussion. I'd just like to see it added to these budget priorities as we move forward. So that would be I would like to move that we continue to work toward funding the Housing Trust Fund under that section.
We have Councilman Duncan. Okay, so it seems that we have a second by Councilwoman Ortiz. Now we have a question by Councilwoman Hiller.
Interesting that you would bring that up. What are the risks that that would be misconstrued? There's been discussion over the years as funding the Housing Trust Fund has been proposed that it should come from funds outside the city budget, not be funded by the city budget. And so what are the risks that adding that, maybe if you've thought it through, would be misconstrued? We finally made the progress to the point where people are talking about raising money from the outside.
Right. I would say that as long as we say we're continuing to work toward it, we're making no inherent promise beyond we will continue the work we've done to this point to find funds, whether it's from us or somewhere else, to eventually fund that. You know, I said this when we passed it. Partly is if we're going to pass things, we need to commit to actually following them through. And I know we are as a body, but I think this reaffirms that we didn't just pass something, put it on paper to placate people and say, we're creating a trust fund finally. I think we need to keep in front, let people know that we're working still towards actually working to fund it somehow. So I wasn't trying to be that specific. I was just trying to keep it in there as we're still working on it. and we're going to get there. But so that's all. I just thought just going to throw it out there tonight.
Thank you, Councilman Duncan. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. I wanted to ask legal, does that bind us in any way? And I didn't think it did, since it said continue to work on putting money in the trust fund. Is that binding the city, or is that just saying that we support it?
This is a resolution.
Councilmember Ortiz, it would not be in any way binding towards the city. It's just aspirational, more or less.
Lisa, is there any way, would you word it any differently, having heard some of the concerns that the council has?
I think it's worded okay to be aspirational, but I would defer to Councilmember Duncan if he wants to do it. This is more of a policy document for the governing body to decide upon, Councilmember Ortiz, so I don't want to insert myself in the wording developed for the budget priorities. I think I think it's broad enough, in addition to the fact that it's not an ordinance. It's a resolution, so I think it's fine.
Basically a supporting document, correct? Okay, and I just want to say, I would like to put money into it, but I also want us to know that this is all of our problem. It's not just a city or a county, it's everybody's problem. So that's why I'm asking. I don't know, Spencer, if you have any questions for me. I'll support it as long as it's not binding us, but I'll support it.
No, it's fine. I mean, as I looked at other past budget priorities, that was something that was in those that we hadn't carried through, nor had we accomplished it to this date, which is one reason I just thought it would be good to keep carrying it through. I didn't know it was going to be, I hadn't thought it through, I guess, that much, but I tried to keep it as broad as possible. So if you want to do it, great. If not, I understand also.
Other questions or comments for Councilman Duncan? Deputy Mayor Padilla.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Duncan, and I think I understand what you're doing. I just want to make clear, you're just keeping it as a priority so it doesn't get just kind of lost in the shuffle. We've not made, like I said, a commitment or anything, but we continue to speak to it specifically that we're working toward that particular housing. I mean, it's not just in general, it's specifically working toward the housing trust fund.
Correct.
Okay.
Like I said, we've created that fund, so I just felt like we should just keep our past priority and say we're still working on how we're going to make that fund, actually functional now that we've created it. So that was just the general intent of the idea.
Kind of holding our feet to the fire.
Well, right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, if there's no further comment, at this point in time, we proceed to vote on this amendment.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Okay, we have an amended document. Do we have any additional questions, or is the body ready to approve the amended document?
Move for approval?
We have a motion for approval for the amended document with the two amendments. Councilwoman Ortiz seconds. Additional comments or questions? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Councilmember Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Lesser,
Yes.
and Mayor De La Isla.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Okay, we now move on to item D, if the clerk would read.
I buried it, sorry. D is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Chat annexing land to the city of Topeka, Kansas in accordance with KSA 12-520, located on the east side of Southeast Croco Road, approximately 300 feet south of Southeast 31st Street within unincorporated Shawnee County, Kansas, and adjacent to the city of Topeka corporate limits, and said land being annexed for all city purposes.
City Manager and Bill Finder is here and not locked up in a garage.
He got out.
Live and in person. Thank you, Mayor. The approval of the Shawnee Woods subdivision number 2 is presented for approval tonight. Questions were raised since the last meeting, and Bill Finder has provided answers to those questions to the governing body. As you see, Bill is available for any follow-up to those questions. We seek your approval of this annexation request.
Governing body, do you have additional questions? I saw a lot of emails go back and forth on this one. Comments or questions on this one? And if there are no comments or questions, what is the pleasure of the body? Councilman Everson.
Move approval.
We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second? Councilman Lesser, thank you for your second. Do we have questions or comments? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Deputy Mayor.
Oh, pardon me. Councilman, Deputy Mayor Padilla, you're dancing.
I'm doing the wave. Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a real objection to this. It just seems like, I know we got a lot of answers to questions posed. It just seemed like this was, and I used it just a herky-jerky way to go through this whole annex procedure. It just seemed like we'd put some things, the cart before the horse, and so I'm just a little curious as do all annexations of this type go along this way where something gets started and then we come in after the fact. I saw the explanations from Mr. Pyander, but it just seems to me a little disconnected in its approach. Is there more clarity, Bill, that you can give me that helps me walk through this?
Yeah, sure. Deputy Mayor, I think what may not be clear is this is a bit of an outlier. Usually when we have an annexation, the development is not knocking on the doorstep, and it can proceed in a much more less herky-jerky sort of fashion. We can get the annexation done. And then they come forward with a benefit district and they still need to build streets and put in the infrastructure. This was one of those ones where it quite honestly it was a minor development at the time. It turned into a little bit bigger annexation with the remainder of the tracks out there. And it did sort of evolve. So we don't normally see this where the development is ahead, basically, of the annexation schedule, and that's really what this ended up being. And so I don't want you to think this is setting any sort of precedent of how we do business. It's just it was the choice between allowing the development to proceed or wait 3 months, and I think that's kind of what you saw here. So hopefully that answers some of the concern.
Thank you, Bill.
Additional comments or questions? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Council members Valdivia Aquila.
Yes.
Ortiz.
Yes.
Emerson.
Yes.
Padilla.
Yes.
Nager.
Yes.
Dobler.
Yes.
Duncan.
Yes.
Lesser.
Yes.
Mayor De La Isla.
Yes.
And Councilmember Hiller.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
We now move on to the non-action items. Non-action item A, if the clerk would read.
A is discussion concerning the repeal of the all-night retailer's license.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of comments. We're considering this as an item that was brought to us as an item that may not be needed any longer within our community. I'll yield the floor to Councilman Duncan, and that he brought this to our attention as a potential change that should be made within our ordinance. So, Councilman Duncan.
This comes from when you talk to your constituents and they bring things to you that probably aren't necessary anymore. You start to take steps to wonder if we really are. And so this is exactly what it says. If you're open between midnight and 6 a.m., you're required to get this license to operate between those hours. It was put into the law officially in, I think, early 80s, 1980, 81. It essentially stems from Prohibition, when they really wanted to track speakeasies and all those other untoward nighttime things that were happening in the city. And they were pretty popular across the country. Since then, several things have changed. We've gotten smarter and we have more technology. Our liquor licenses, any business, whether you have a liquor license or not, has to get this. So that would include a laundromat or someone else. But the liquor licenses now give broad authority to law enforcement to sort of do whatever they need to do to track these. Upon talking to some folks, I did go speak with the police department, and I said, hey, if you tell me getting rid of this really mucks things up, let me know. And they said, no, we really do not use this anymore to track businesses. We know who's open. If there's a problem, we show up and we deal with it. I talked to the city clerk and asked about the time that goes into actually processing these licenses and what the numbers were. I think she gave some numbers here that says we're talking 100 a year, 93 a year on average. There are probably hundreds of businesses that actually qualify for this that simply don't get it. And I believe in one email I sent to the city manager, I said, from my perspective, we have two choices. We can either sink a lot of time, energy, and resources into chasing all those down and actually doing it, or maybe if we're really not using it, it's time to just kick it out of there. And so I did have all those conversations with staff to make sure that I wasn't, there wasn't something I was missing. And to date, no one's brought anything forward. If there is, this is a good time to let me know. And so that's why we brought this to you tonight for discussion, see if you had questions. And one of the reasons to bring it up now and vote on it hopefully at our next meeting is they're due this month. So if people know that maybe we're leaning towards this way, they may not send in their $40. It's a $40 license, and know that they don't have to deal with it at this time. So it's good timing. One of the reasons we tried to bring it kind of quick is because of the timing of it. So I guess if you have questions or staff wants to add anything, let me know.
Questions for Councilman Duncan? Councilwoman Hiller.
This makes sense. We're looking at a variety of things tonight, I guess, that have outdated language. Could somebody help me with, the term dance hall is also in some of our licenses. Is there something that's still contemporary about dance hall licenses?
Councilwoman Hiller, right now, staff has actually already done some review of various other licenses and so forth for Title V. Because of some of the other items that have been placed on the agenda over the last 3-4 months, it was a very crowded agenda. And so staff deferred doing that type of cleanup earlier, but we're getting close to being ready to bring other Title V changes, which is where this is located, forward. And so Lisa and Brenda have been working hard trying to identify those old, outdated types of ordinances or ordinance language and make changes, make recommendations for changes. So there'll be other items similar to this that you'll see in, I believe it was May. In May, we'll be looking at bringing these changes, some additional changes forward in Title V. We've got other things on the agenda in April for our reorg and so forth. And so we'll address those in April, and then we'll look at doing this in May.
Just out of curiosity, since we're talking about it, are those fees due at the same time, or are those more on a rotating basis like these others, the liquor licenses that are annual?
I would defer to Brenda. She's the one, her office is taking those.
Yeah, so Councilmember Hiller, most of those licenses are on rotating schedules. This one in particular is just coming up at the end of April. So it's convenient, and it's, like he said, very outdated. And I'm not sure that I have discovered any other city that has an open after midnight license. But the dance hall license and things of that nature have a few more layers in them that we need to work through. So, but yeah, you're correct. They're all in different schedules.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, additional comments or questions for Mr. Duncan? Yes, Councilman Dobler.
City Manager, have you identified in our $300 million budget the source of the $3,720 that we're going to lose?
We will absorb that, Councilman.
Thank you.
Let's see, we have to cut all our pay for.
Well, it seems like there really is not a lot of questions, and Councilman Duncan, thank you for bringing this to our attention. If you do have anything that pops up, or if you want to make sure that you know what to share with your community in your specific district before we bring this up in April, please make sure that reach out to staff or to Councilman Duncan, because it seems like if there's not a lot of questions, this will be up for vote pretty soon. Thank you very much. At this point, we move on to item B, if the clerk would read.
B is discussion regarding the revisions to the Topeka Municipal Code to reflect updates to chapters 2.30 and 2.35 concerning compulsory retirement.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. This actually is an item that we need to talk about adding something back in. It was removed erroneously last year, and City Attorney Lisa Robinson will review the recommend changes to Chapter 2.30 and 2.35 of the municipal code as it relates to compulsory retirement age. Lisa?
Thank you, City Manager. So this is in part adding back in, it is in part taking out. So what needs to be added back in is the compulsory retirement verbiage that we accidentally took out when we did that massive overhaul of the personnel code revisions. There was a provision in the benefits section, and one of those pieces was fire and police pensions. And it was a compulsory retirement. The same language is being proposed to be added back in, 67 for police, age 60 for fire. So we want to add that back in. The reason why is because the ADEA says that that language is a local law, has to be a local law, which means we couldn't just put it in the personnel manual, we had to put it in the code. So that's why we recommend it be put back in. And it'll be in both those chapters, 2.30 and 2.35. Then on the, let's check and see what's in our code, we found out that in 2.30, the fire department has got language in there that is very, very, very outdated. So we went over to visit with Chief Duke and the deputy chief, I believe, as well, and asked them, do you do any of these things anymore? One was a records retention. They took us back into a room that had big boxes and files, and they said binders, and threw them out, and they had dust on them. And they said, we haven't looked at these forever, but they're here if you want to go through them. So they basically don't do that anymore. I mean, Brenda is the record keeper. Anything else that they need, records they need to be kept are kept by the fire marshal, what have you. Another piece of it was the procurement policies, the personnel policies. All that was in the fire, chapter, and that's all handled by finance and by HR right now. The authority piece is already covered in the chapter that deals with all departments, gives them broad authority. There's just a little bit that we left in there as far as fire scenes goes, but everything else we propose to be taken out. There's another Firefighters Relief Association language. It's an entire title in the code, and it's one section. So we carved that out, and we're going to put it in the chapter with the fire department. So those are basically the changes that we propose for 2.30. Any questions on that one? With related to fire?
Questions for, yes, Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Mrs. Robinson, I guess my question is this, why is this a problem, I guess, if it goes unaddressed? Don't most of them retire well before that? So is there a practical reason this has to be done?
It's a requirement of the ADEA that be a local law, that there be the retirement age set, if we have one. If there's a compulsory retirement age, it has to be established in the code, shown in the code.
And are these the only two departments then that have compulsory retirement?
To my knowledge, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess my question, maybe a further question, is why is there a need for a compulsory retirement age? Because again, there's a lot of incentives to retire way before this. So is there a reason to need a compulsory retirement age?
I don't know if there is an absolute need for it. I think maybe the chief, one of them know, but It was in there before in the benefits section. Apparently, there is a provision in the ADA that says it has to be a local law. It must be statutory. But it has to be in there.
Okay, if that's something you can maybe in the next.
Absolutely.
For our next meeting, please just let me know.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mrs. Robinson, ADA, is that?
Oh, American, sorry. It's the age discrimination law. Sorry about the alphabet soup.
Okay, thank you. I think American Dental Association, so
Yeah,
that's very helpful.
ADA.
We all think of it.
And then I really appreciate you taking the initiative to make sure that we're cleaning up the language and taking care of redundant issues, and also making sure that we aren't retaining a fire hazard for the fire department. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All those right.
So then I have chapter 2.35, which is TPD. In this particular chapter, we added the compulsory retirement in, and we are deleting a lot of sections in this one. A big bunch of them deal with the capital area major case squad, and another big batch of them deal with the confidential police investigation fund. So as I understand it, this capital area major case squad, I don't know that it exists anymore, and it hasn't for a while, but it is covered if you do any kind of multi-jurisdictional task force that's covered by a police policy that's noted in here. There's several of them, and I read through it, and it would be covered under those. And then the police investigation fund, there is a whole separate TPD policy on impressed funds is very, very specific. So that's what covers these. So we recommend wiping out all of this language. There was set in Article 1, there was language in there that talks about the TPD maintaining court dockets. I haven't done that forever, and it's done by municipal court, so we're proposing to delete that as well. And that's it on chapter 2.35.
Additional questions
on that
for
one?
Ms. Robertson? Seeing none? Ms. Robertson, anything else that you want to share with us?
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. Nope.
Okay.
I'll get the information for next week.
No. So if you do have any questions with regards to what Ms. Robertson has shared, please feel free to contact her. This week, as you all know, this is a discussion item. This is something that you have some time, especially considering that we don't have a council meeting, I think, next week. You have a few weeks to be able to get in touch with city attorney and get some additional clarifications on. If there's no other questions or comments, then we will move on to item C. If the clerk would read.
C is discussion of the proposed 2022 to 2031 capital improvement plan and 2022 to 2024 capital improvement budget.
City manager.
Thank you. Through discussions on the capital improvement budget, there were questions raised regarding the biogas project and the requested additional $1.2 million in funding for that project. I've asked Braxton Copley, Interim Director of Utilities, to review the project and details with you tonight. So Braxton?
Thank you. Forgotten how to do this from the council chamber. I'm so spoiled of zooming from my office and having everything there. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this project. Honestly, since starting at the city back in 2000, this is probably the most exciting project that I've been associated with in terms of a utilities project that actually pays for itself, albeit it's taken 34 years, but it does pay for itself, and is providing a true environmental benefit to us in terms of a beneficial reuse of something that currently is being flared off. So going back down memory lane, back in 2016, we engaged a consultant and said, okay, we have this resource, this methane. We're using a little bit of it for cogen to generate some electrical energy on the plant. We're using a tiny little bit of it to heat our digesters. What's going to be the best path forward? And basically, the three that were looked at was CNG, compressed natural gas, which you see some fleets turning to now. The cogen, again, taking that gas, either using it to heat our digesters or to put it into boilers to generate electrical energy to power functions of the plant. And RNG, renewable natural gas, which carries with it, because this is a renewable, green source, potential for revenue from tax credits. And we ultimately chose going with the biogas route because it was the one that was going to be absolutely the most cost effective. So we're looking at the this project paying for the $26 million of capital costs, all of the O&M costs, and they are substantial. I mean, just to give you an idea, we're looking at almost $200,000 a year of electricity to power these, the compressors, the scrubbers, the pumps, everything. We're looking at carbon media replacement, $189,000 a year. We're looking at replacing compressors, blowers, HVAC, comes out to about $65,000 a year. These are, and then we're looking at another $50,000 a year just for O&M on that, on the gas line that we're going to be generating. So, fortunately, it generates a lot of revenue, as I've shared with you in the past. First full year, we're looking at $1.7 million of revenue. 90% of that is coming from the credits, 10% from the sale of gas. So you've got this revenue stream offsetting capital costs, O&M costs, principal and interest, payback at year 34. So the history of it. First 2 years that it came in front of the governing body, 16 and 17, basically totaled about $9.5 million. That was for the dewatering phase. And that includes the centrifuges. 18, 19, 20, that was the quote unquote, the biogas portion, the $16 million biogas. 10 million for the first tranche, and then 2 million and 3 million. One of those was because of the Southern Star interconnect fee and the 2-mile pipeline. And then the other was for equipment increases as we basically fine-tuned, got ready for making purchases and finishing up the design. We're back in front of you now for the 1.2 million. So the 1.2 million, when we initially negotiated the contract with Southern Star back in 2017, it might have been 2018 early before we finally got it finalized. They did not include a contribution in aid of capital. That alone, and basically what that is the IRS has deemed that if an entity that's a potential customer makes a contribution in aid of construction of a capital asset, that's considered taxable income to the recipient of that capital contribution. In other words, Southern Star. So you're looking at $300,000 that we're effectively having to pay their income tax for building this $2 million facility for the offtake. The other significant increases were for their administrative and general overhead has doubled since 2017. The construction costs and material costs that they used back were late 16, early 17 costs. And those have gone up substantially in this intervening 4 years. So that's when they came back to us and said it's no longer $1 million, it's now $2.2 million. So that's why we're making this ask to you and what the explanation is. So phase 1, centrifuges, biosolids, was completed in July of 2020. These centrifuges are substantially more efficient, both energy-wise, as well as the product that they turn out has about 15 to 20% less moisture in it. So that's just a reduction of the amount of biosolid waste that we're having to haul off. Some of the biosolids we're still using, it's the Class A biosolids. We're still land applying that. I'll talk about that in a moment. But a lot of the biosolids, the Class B, is hauled off to the dump. So just think about it. Instead of 100 tons, it's now 80 tons. So less that we're having to haul off to the dump and pay tipping fees for. Phase two is the biogas part. Total cost $16 million. That includes the additional $1.2 million ask. This includes the facilities at the plant, as well as the biogas pipeline that we've talked about several times. It's a 2-mile pipeline. You see the dotted white line at the top of the page. That is the Southern Star wholesale pipeline that goes through North Topeka, north of the Soldier Channel. Our line is basically paralleling Meriden Road and will tie into the Southern Star gas pipeline. Obviously, it's a substantial project with borings under the Kansas River, Soldier Creek, rail lines, and 24 highway. The outside tanks are used to remove hydrogen sulfide, as well as VOCs, volatile organic components. Inside the large new building is the analyzers, both on the raw gas and the finished gas, as well as our equipment to compress, pressurize, put it into, and send it through the pipeline. In the foreground, you see some of that new 3-inch coated steel gas pipeline that has been welded into sections for doing the bore. Talked a little bit about the Class A biosolids. We're still generating that. In fact, just last week, before the rain started, we were able to land apply to one of our local fields. Class A biosolids, it is the dried waste that is treated to an extent that it has killed any of the pathogens in there, as well as there's strict limitations by the EPA as to what minerals can be in there. Those are reduced. It's safe to basically for a home gardener to come up with a pickup truck and fill it up and land apply it in their own vegetable garden. That's what the Class A biosolids are. So with that, I will gladly stand for any questions that you have about the biosolids or any of our other projects that we've presented.
We have 2 individuals ready for questions. The first one is Councilwoman Hannah Nagers, followed by Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Braxton, for that presentation. As far as, are there any studies done on any byproducts that might be produced or exuded from this process that would be harmful to the community? Or if there was any sort of leaking in the pipes or anything like that? Is that usually a problem in projects like this?
So I think the starting point is probably the gas line, because I would think, in my opinion, that's where you have the greatest potential issue in terms of safety. There was a safety study done by our consultant. Because of the relatively low density of population where that pipeline is running, we are not going to be required to put that rotten egg smell into the gas like KGS has to put into its distribution system here. So to me, that's the greatest risk. I think that that's minimal risk. Obviously, to attenuate that, we have built into our budget for this $50,000 a year for a third-party company to come in and inspect and test that gas line to make sure that it is safe and is safely conveying that gas to the Southern Star point. And then obviously we have analyzers on both ends. Our analyzer in terms of what we're putting in terms of gas quality, with the ability to just stop it dead if we exceed any of Southern Star's limitations, as well as they have analyzers on their end to say if this gas isn't good, then it has to stop. So.
And I'm guessing that the analyzers will pick up on any issues when we need to do maintenance, not only whenever there's an emergency, correct?
Well, that would be gas detectors that we would have inside that facility that I showed you to make sure that we don't have a gas leak that would be a potential hazard to us or to the community.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. Braxton, I just wanted to ask, the 1.2 million and the breakdown of it, that's a one-time, those are one-time fees? We're not going to anticipate additional fees, even if it's a lesser amount of this nature every year, correct?
Correct. These are the upfront fees that they're charging us to construct and put that facility into service. That's what that 2.2 million is.
So again,
One
it's
time.
part of the construction, and we shouldn't anticipate that there's going to be these type of charges that we're going to continue to incur, kind of not really at the last minute, but kind of feels like it jumped up on you.
Yes, it very much feels that it jumped up on me after we all had negotiated back in 2017 the terms of it, and then they came back and said, no, it's going to be another $1.2 million. But yes, these are all related to the initial construction. There are obviously fees that we have to pay to put the gas into their system that have been incorporated into that pro forma that we provided you with all of the operating costs, capital costs, interest, and principal expense.
Okay, I think that was, with this specific amount, we're not going to keep incurring. I think that was a yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Councilman Lesser, to be followed by Councilman Dobler.
Thank you. Two questions, Braxton. And you're going to have to kind of educate me on both of them. First off is, explain to me, if we had a contract, why now we're going back, they're coming back and asking for additional funds?
Because their attorneys very carefully crafted the language of the contract to say we were going to be responsible for all costs that they incurred for the construction of this facility, estimated to be X number of dollars. But the bottom line is the legal obligation under that contract is we were going to make them whole for all costs associated with the construction. The amount that was put in as an exhibit was simply an estimate based on 2017. Fast forward 4 years, and they said, these are what all of the costs are. And the big one is that capital contribution in aid of capital, that $300,000. And they, of their own admission, said, well, because you guys were a municipal utility, this is a sort of one-off. You're not a franchised utility putting gas into our system. They did not think that the CIAC, the capital contribution in aid of capital, was applicable to us. But since then, they'd gone back to their counsel. We went to our outside counsel, who verified it's legit, it's required under the Treasury Code, or I'm sorry, the Rev.
That's fine.
Let me tell you which.
So then.
It's Internal Revenue Code, Section 118B.
Okay. And I don't just doubt that whatsoever. So it kind of sounds to me like we didn't really have a contract then. I mean, to a certain extent. Yeah. I mean, from the standpoint of, or the previous governing body was, in essence, approved a contract that was completely open, or whatever, when it was first. What year was it first approved, the contract?
Well, again, keep in mind that under the Topeka Charter, the governing body does not approve contracts. City manager is the one who has the authority to execute contracts. Certainly, when we were negotiating this back in 2017, we all sitting at the table had the expectation that it was going to be $1 million. Now in 2021, and again, the contract said you're going to pay for and make us whole for whatever this costs.
Okay. So we did that, so at the end of the day, we didn't know what we were going to pay in 2017 then.
We had an estimate based on 2017 dollars, correct.
Second question I have is, it follows a little bit with Hannah's question. Educate me a little bit. It's up and running, everything's going. We have a natural disaster of a tornado comes through here wipes the plant out. Do we have any increased in that situation of byproducts and any increased type of environmental issues if that situation was to happen compared to what we have right now?
No, it's actually going to be safer because we have the facilities to be able to compress and condense that. Right now, if we had a natural disaster that wiped out those flares, that methane is just going up into the environment.
The process doesn't create anything
Correct.
additional that.
Correct. It's actually simply scrubbing that gas and getting it to a point where it becomes true natural gas, so it's commercially saleable and usable.
Thank you.
Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. Braxton, a couple questions here. So there's two phases to this project, 27 million. First phase about 10 million for dewatering. Payback period of 34 years, expire 7 million.
No, sir. Payback period of 34 years is just for the biogas because the biogas is what is generating the revenue to do this. I did not think it was fair to saddle the biogas project with the payback of the biosolids project. The biosolids project is one that we are able to bond at a tax exempt bond because it is just part of, we had to do it anyway. The filter belt presses were beyond their useful life. Breaking down, we were incurring tons of overhead. We were going to have to replace them with some technology that we would have to pay for.
Okay.
Biogas is a little different.
All right. That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, before further discussion, Councilwoman Heller.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions. This pipeline is already in.
A very small portion of the pipeline has been put in ground and is constructed.
Has it been run under the river and all that yet?
No, ma'am.
If I may, the Mayor, a lot of the, it worries me to look at I know a lot of most of this money is spent, but when you look at the annualized profit or revenue and expense statement, there are years before we get to 34 years where we're in the hole over $5 million a year to pay for this. And it sounds like from what you said, not sure I can tell the difference on here, that a lot of the revenue comes from tax credits, not from the sale itself.
That is correct.
And are we certain that the tax credits will last all this? Talk about the certainty that we'll have tax credits this whole time?
The company that we have engaged to assist us with marketing the gas and the tax credits is Blue Source. They are absolute experts in this field. They have an incredibly optimistic viewpoint of the lifespan of the tax credits, buoyed by the results of the latest elections. So they are very confident in terms of the tax credit revenue and both in the longevity of the tax credits as well as the value of the tax credits.
Okay. Wanted to ask another about the biosolids. And I did my best to follow your biosolids A and biosolids B. The B biosolids are, I know that for years I think we sold some of them and then pretty much we're just giving them away to people that would show up with a truck for fertilizer in effect.
That's on the Class A, which is the small, very small portion of the biosolids that is turned into the Class A biosolids. The biggest portion are the Class B biosolids, which are the ones that are currently being hauled off to the dump. So we're paying transportation costs. We're also paying a tipping fee. That's where we see the benefit of the centrifuges in terms of reducing the amount of those Class B biosolids that are being basically hauled off and wasted to the dump.
And there's no way that those are usable or marketable?
I'm certainly not an expert in biosolids, but it's my understanding it is a very time-consuming process to be able to ripen those biosolids to get them to the point where they are the Class A, where they have basically no impurities that would be any threat to health and safety. And so that's why we've always historically done a small portion of the Class A. Majority gets hauled off to the dump.
I'm sorry, the majority of the Class A gets hauled off as well?
No, we have a very small amount of Class A. The Class A is what is made available from time to time to property owners. Hey, we've got some extra Class A. If you guys would like it, you can come have it. Otherwise, we land apply that to farm fields in the community. That's the Class A.
And do we sell any of the Class A?
I do not know the answer to that question, but I will find out, and I will send an email to the finance department to share with the council.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala, and we have Councilman Emerson. The other thing that I will let you guys know is that I am heading out. I am a little bit under the weather today, so Deputy Mayor Padilla will continue with the meeting. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Take care. I would just say, Braxton, I know that you all and Bob and Sylvia did a tremendous amount of work with educating me on this process. Obviously, I had deep, deep concerns. I know that this is a huge investment, that has been put in, but as much research as I've done on the biogas and utilities and the waste and all of this, and the way that the methane for years has been flaring up, it not only seeing about how you educated me, even though I had some questions and concerns, and I'm still just the whole thing about it going underground, underneath the river and Soldier Creek and the railroad and stuff. And then you told me about how many other lines there are across the city, et cetera. And I know you were trying to assuage, concerns I had for the community. But again, I've learned so much about the process and believe that this investment is worth it long-term for the community and for trying to have some kind of positive impact on the environment where we are right now. And the thought of not having that methane flare continuously is, I think, a large relief to me. I know that these costs are unexpected, but sometimes for these type of major initiatives, I think sometimes this extra investment, even if we're not expecting it, is just, it's ultimately, it will be worth it. At least I hope it will. So I just wanted to give that bit of feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Copley, I also share your distaste for this 1.2 million that they've kind of laid on us here. I understand from there might be an opportunity to sell to a different entity.
Correct.
Would doing that reduce the construction cost? And I don't know what that would change. Would it?
So the reason why we went to Southern Star is because we initially reached out to Kansas Gas Services, our local gas distribution company. At that time, they said that they were not in any way, shape, or form interested in our gas because they did not believe we could meet their standards. So at that point, we went and negotiated with Southern Star. Literally a couple of months ago, One Gas, who's the parent for KGS, came to us and said, we've had a major change at the highest level, and we embrace renewable natural gas. So at that point, we said, well, we have a few questions for you. One of those is, What kind of facility would you require us to construct? What kind of gas line would you require us to construct? What is your interconnection fee? Are you going to charge us a CIAC, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, we learn our lessons.
Learn what to ask, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we are impatiently waiting on One Gas to answer our long list of pointed questions. Our hope is that they will work with us and that we will be able to construct a very short line and connect it into the KGS system without having to construct a 2-mile line, which is why we haven't constructed yet under the river or through the woods, because we issued a stop work order on our contractor because I didn't want to continue to construct a 2-mile gas line that I might not have to use. So I wish I had more answers. Periodically, I send a little email to my contact at One Gas saying, can you please answer my questions? We are becoming impatient. Time is of the essence. So that's where we are. But best case scenario, One Gas says, you know what? It's only going to be $1 million for interconnection fee, et cetera, for us. At that point, I don't need the 1.2 million, and I'm sure not going to bond anything that I don't need. So that's where we are. I wish I had a better answer for you. We are obviously very concerned about the cost of this project. We're doing everything that we can to pursue options to come in the most cost-effective, reasonable way that we can.
And I appreciate you looking at that. Thank you.
Any further questions, Councilman Duncan?
I guess I have a general question, and maybe you could answer this to your department. I don't know if the city manager wants to, if there's a citywide policy on this, but what is our policy on, when does an estimate become too old? And the reason I ask that, and I don't have any specific project, I'm looking at utilities, I'm saying, oh my gosh, but in general, as I look through these projects this year and last year, I mean, there's some estimates that are 5 years old. Do we have a point where we say, we probably need to a policy in place that says it's too old, or is there a general, policy you follow on updating estimates in some of these projects?
As I'm looking at the CIP every year, as I'm dusting that off and bringing it out, one of the things I'm looking at is how old is that estimate on this project that I might have put together back in 2017 that's now coming up? And then I'm saying, okay, I need to adjust this for inflation, if anything. And so we do that as part of that review and submittal of the CIP, which occurs back in November and December, and then it gets disseminated to you guys in January, February, and move forward. On construction costs, I mean, as we're putting projects together, we're looking back 3-4 months in terms of what bid prices are, because we've seen some pretty substantial cost increase over the course of the last 2 years in terms of construction. So 3 months, 4 months could be too old for a construction cost estimate. We try to also build in, as we're putting these together for our CIP, I've got things in 5 years from now. I mean, I would be lying to you if I said that this isn't an educated wag to put this together and try to build in a good amount of contingency, and then trying to relook at those as we dust off the CIP and bring it back in front of you.
Okay, no, that's helpful. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any further comments or any for staff? Councilwoman Miller.
Thank you. I'm not sure it's exactly to staff, but along the lines of this conversation, and we now have our Public Works Infrastructure Committee as well. And if you go all the way back on this project to 2016 when it started, and it kept growing and growing, I don't know if in our policy of review for the CIP or whatever, we can, it really troubles me to then get to this point and have somebody say, well, you voted on it. If there's some threshold triggers to simply review an entire project that we could put into our new emerging review process. When you've got a book this big every year, that's a little hard to take responsibility for every single project. But as I'm looking at when this was at $9-point-something million and the 10 million got added to the top of it, it was still talking about just the repair and upgrades of the existing facility. So the project morphed along, with the best of intentions, I understand that. It just,
Well, I think
just a comment.
I think if we look at the project itself, it did not morph in the sense of we knew what we were targeting, in the sense that we knew we were first going to do dewatering, that was something that we needed to do in order for the plant to be more successful and lower our operational costs. So that was 100%, we knew that would be a benefit, and it actually took a little while to get it dialed in, but now it's really showing its benefit. The second part, though, related to taking over the gas program and converting that, we knew what our target was. But we've got to remember, this is very new technology. There is a limited number of these facilities across the country. Yes, it would have been nice to have, we should have probably locked a little more down on what we could have done, but I'm not sure we would have got a contract or a commitment from Southern Star had we not left it the way it was. And then we would have not had a customer and then not been able to even do the project and have the opportunity of turning this into. So we've got to take a look at both of those factors. I think it's very well pointed out by Councilman Lesser that try and nail those things down a little better as we approach them. But I think we knew where the target was. It's just that some of these additional costs surprised us. And so I think we'll continue to work hard on trying to not let that happen in the future. But projects like that happen.
If I could just make a comment to follow up on Councilwoman Hiller's, I think the infrastructure committee, even though utility projects aren't part of the charter in essence, I think what we're seeing is a lot of information being exchanged in that setting. This is a large project. I'm going to guess that all of our really big projects, as time goes along, will probably appear in front of the updates, perhaps in front of the infrastructure committee. I think that's a good use of the time and resources to keep the council up to date. So thank you.
I'll piggyback on what Councilman Dobler's just said. I really do believe that bringing utility projects to that committee is something that we would like to do in the future. There's no reason. Some of our larger projects are utility projects. But as we've looked at the agenda that committee has covered over the last 6 months, they covered a lot of ground already, and there just has not been time to insert a discussion about these utility projects. And I see that being something very beneficial to make sure that it's transparent on what projects we're working on and show the benefit that we get. And I think that pays off when we go to ask for rate increases or things like that. We can show the progress that we're making in the system and improving it. So it just gives us another way to really highlight the projects and good work that we're doing in fixing our infrastructure within the city.
I might just want to add, just to follow up on what city manager said, I do believe that the work that the committee has done has been a real improvement over being able to understand and look at these huge projects in a way that really breaks it down for us. So I think it really helps us come to a better understanding of where we are, and I commend the committee members for their work. Any further comments or questions with regards to this item? Seeing none, thank you, Braxton.
We do have one public comment on this.
And I see we have a Mr. Ledbetter signed up for public comment.
Thank you. Governing body, this project's very interesting as I hear the discussion. So if I could ask questions, I would, so maybe I'll just ask them anyway. Do we even have a contract to sell this gas to any of these entities? Is it signed, approved? A 34-year payback, when you calculate that out, is 2.9%. If you adjust for 2% inflation, this project will never pay for itself. I'm concerned about the last minute 1.2 million being stuck into a contract. I think I'm going to CORA that contract and ask where that was and where that increase came from. I want to hand out I hope I have enough copies. I apologize if I didn't. One for the clerk and the rest to go around the table, please. This is a copy of what the county does, and I don't think it's a bad thing to look across the aisle and see if they're doing something better than we are or if we're doing something better than they are. All contracts have to run for approval through the legal office. I was told by Betty Griner, who's the CPA, that they had about $40 million in contracts last year. So that'll quantify the kind of numbers we're talking about. Every contract has to be approved by the county commission. Every contract. Formal bids are always required on anything over $10,000. I am going to ask, and I'll probably core this, how many projects or contracts have we let over $50,000 that have not had bids or followed the bidding procedure in the last 3 years? So I'm going to make that core request by email before I leave tonight, so it's fresh in my mind. I do that sometimes when I'm sitting down there. I think of core requests that would be appropriate for the subject at hand. So I pass those out. Thank you. And I'm going to try to make sure that the people watching by Zoom get that. I'm not talking about the public, but certainly we want to make sure all the council people get to review that. When we do contracts, CIP, these contracts and projects need to be brought back before the council the year of the contract. You just heard discussions about how inflation or different costs can add up and add to the cost of a estimate from 5 years ago. I could never go to a bank with a 5-year-old estimate on a rehab of a house if I'm doing that. They would say, are you kidding me? They ask me for estimates timely. I have to produce those. I have to prove that I'm spending the money where it's supposed to if I'm doing a house. And I do that occasionally on the side. It's just a little side investment I like to do, helping improve my city and investing here and keeping them up to code, by the way. And so all of these projects that you're approving tonight are in these CIP processes. I'm being told that we're relying on votes that happened 5 years ago to approve a project. Case in point, 12th Street, which is now being narrowed to a one-laner. I'm going, my God, you think 5 years ago the council thought of that? I don't think so. And do you think the voters approved that when they passed that county tax, that they were envisioning a one-lane 12th Street and a one-lane Huntoon? No. These projects need to be brought back before you to make sure that the public has input in a timely fashion. I hate to do that.
Would you require more time?
I actually would, and I think I've about wrapped it up. If I could have, it says 2 minutes. Okay.
So moved.
I didn't set that.
Motion in a second. Motion in a second. Please call the vote.
Councilmember Ortiz? Councilmembers Emerson?
Yes.
Padilla?
Yes.
Nager?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Lesser?
Yes.
Hiller?
Yes.
And Valdivia Aquila.
Yes.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
So thank you very much for those affirmative votes. When it is so vexing to see a project not brought back before the council where you know that it's going to cost more money, you know that we don't even know if these things are being competitively bid sometimes. I really want the council with every project to see the competitive bid documents that we see at the MTA when we do competitive bids. And believe me, these are much smaller numbers over there than what you're seeing. But in order for us to do our due diligence as board members, in order for us to do our fiduciary duty, we have to see those bid documents, that they went out to different bidders. We see what they bid. We want to see that they're competent to do the projects. But most of all, that the money is well spent and accounted for. And competitively bid is really good. and we approve those. The director doesn't get to sign off on that and just say, well, I'll just pass this. No, we as a board have to approve those. And, okay, so I am really encouraging this body to change that ordinance and make sure that all of these projects are brought back in the same year where we have reasonable, timely estimates, we have good bid documents supporting them, we have a good idea of what the scope of the project is. It hasn't been changed dramatically by somebody in planning that had nothing to do with public works, and taking over another department. And that we have, I won't mention any parks, never mind, I won't go there. But I just want to see that the public has influence about what's going on in a timely fashion. And that the council is very transparent about how these monies are spent, because we're dealing with millions and tens of millions of dollars when I look at these contracts. So I want to thank you for that extra time. And yes, I certainly have questions about this other project in Oakland, but those were my questions. Thank you.
And as I see, we have no one else signed up for public comment. City Manager?
Can I make a quick comment? I want to make a comment because I think it's worthwhile to note. Our projects are competitive bid. We have a purchase policy that our staff follows. And to say that we're not doing it correctly, I can't let stand. I don't mind being questioned whether it's an appropriate project or not. We're following the policy and we're doing it correctly. And so I'm not going to allow that to be said without at least commenting on it. So thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilman Emerson, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Not about this, nothing about what we were just talking about, but in general, since this item we're discussing is the actual CIP plan, actually met with Councilwoman Hiller last week, and we went over, kind of compared notes on a few things. And I guess I wanted to, in a couple of weeks, so this will be coming for us for a vote. And the only issue I run into, and I've run into this now, I guess, 3 or 4 years, however long I've done this, is that night when it comes to vote, there's too much stuff to discuss on it, and you have 10 amendments and all this stuff. So I guess I kind of wanted to put out there a couple things that I'm, with the assistance, Councilwoman Hiller, have kind of discussed. And one of them is, and you may have heard this before, but in our debt service fund, we currently have a surplus, and each year it's actually growing. So one of the things I've worked with both Karen and with Ms. Lamondola and Mr. Wade is a way we can start funding projects out of that with cash. There are some gymnastics that have to be done, and Ms. Lamondola and Mr. Wade are working on those. But that's something I'll be bringing forward when we actually go to vote on the CIP. Also, one ask I had, and there are some utility projects that are this way. Right now, in my opinion, we've gotten maybe a little complacent in that we have too many, in my opinion, bucket projects where we're going to do a certain type of work, and they just want to get $1.5 million a year every year for the next 10 years. I would really like to see, so that we can evaluate whether that's appropriate use, I'd really like to see at least stuff that's in the 3-year CIBs to be more detailed out. And I don't mean to pick on somebody I work with, but one thing is like the lift station projects is just something that I can think of. There's $1.5 million a year, and I'd really like to see, hey, what 3 are you going to work on this year and the next year? Because I think it really helps to plan. One of the things I think in the past has happened is we get a lot of these things kind of piled up, and then it's kind of hard to sort out what we're supposed to do. So I would really, I guess I'd make that ask on anything that's currently like a bucket of money that we at least have some specificity in the next couple of years, which ones, what projects they tend to. And I will say, Public Works, I think, does a very good job of this. You'll see a lot of times they'll say Topeka Boulevard from 45th to 49th is going to be on there. They're very specific on street projects. I would like to have as much specificity as we can on any of these.
Deputy Mayor? Thank you. You know, that's one of the things that I feel that the Public Works Infrastructure Committee is really been created to help with, because so often we would say, okay, we're going to do $8 million in overlay, and nobody knows where is that $8 million going to be paid other than our city engineer. And so the intent is that information street by street is brought forward to that Public Works Infrastructure Committee and allows them to first also make comments, but also listen to what we intend to where to spend that money, and then also allows then some flexibility to receive input to say, it would be better, in my opinion, to do this street, these areas, and help us to influence, you know, give that opportunity that there are identified areas that are a higher priority. That influence by the committee allows that to move forward. And so, but I think I'll talk to staff and we'll see what we can do is how far out. I will tell you that, for example, utilizing our Fracta software, a water main that we think we might do in year 2 may have to go to year 1 based on different things that happen. So I think we can narrow it down for you, but we also do those bucket type projects in order to allow us flexibility that if we identify a street that gets worse or a water main that gets worse, that we have the flexibility to be able to make adjustments to that as needed. And so I think we can give you, and I think staff has an idea, a year or 2 out, probably maybe 3, what streets or areas, or, you know, those types of projects are going to be done. But we also do it in order to allow us flexibility. So if you want to know what we intend to do, we can provide that to you, but realize that there may be a need to make a modification to that.
Sure, if I could. Yeah, thank you, City Manager. And I certainly don't have an issue at all with you guys having the flexibility, but it really helps us to know, you know, if a constituent has something,
You're right.
you know, and then we say, hey, at least it's scheduled. It may be next year, it may be the year after, but it's at least.
And that's something that I've realized in discussions with you, is often you and others, is that oftentimes we may know that project's coming soon, but others may not, and you may not, and be able to, you can't answer the question to them. And you want to be in the know as to what especially is going on in your district and what's anticipated to be done in your district. And so we're trying to do a better job with providing you that information rather than holding it just to ourselves.
Thank you, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could follow up on that one in particular, it was interesting to have the conversation, but it used to be not long ago, like maybe even 4 years ago or 5 years ago, that when we got the pages, the staff listed the projects that they were expecting in the immediate first year of the plan on any of those, quote, bucket ones. So it would list which alleys they were looking at, which mill and overlays they were looking at. And I understand that it could change, but the committee has been working its tail off, and it's taken a lot of time. And the rest of us, I'll speak for myself, it's just too much information to get all the way through. And rather than have the committee alone be the ones to see what projects are coming up, if the first year's worth of projects were in the book again, and one would think, and this is some of our conversation, that if the staff didn't already have them in mind in February the year before, they probably weren't going to get done in that first year, just because it takes that much time to plan and sort out. I agree that the council's open to changes, but I think that would let us all look and see if the project that somebody told somebody's constituent could probably be done next year did in fact roll up, that kind of thing. It would let all of us see what was on that first year, and maybe it would still leave some flexible dollars, but I think it would help everyone.
Okay. Thank you for the feedback.
Sure. To
date, have we conducted a study or analysis of the transition, of what it would look like, or feasibility of transitioning purchased vehicles to leases?
Yeah, that was, the last Public Works Infrastructure Committee went through and has a proposal that will eventually come back to you related to, in simplistic terms, we're looking at about 100 light-duty trucks and other types of vehicles in that type of area to start with, and that we have roughly 221, if I remember the numbers right, in that category. So looking at roughly half of that type of fleet that has the greatest possibility for working as a lease of those vehicles. And so looking at numbers right now that are favorable to be able to do that, and then the follow-on year do additional vehicles if we like what we see after the first year of the program. And so that is something that we're driving forward. The committee's heard presentations, and the last presentation this week was very, very specific on what we're looking at doing. Identified certain vehicles that are heavy equipment that we still need to be looking at bonding for in order, based on their cost and lifespan that they have. We want to keep doing that. And then other vehicles that it makes the most sense to purchase with cash rather than do a lease or a bond, such as our police vehicles that we really literally use them up in 2 years of any substantial value. And so those really need to continue to be cash. And so really getting a comprehensive plan for what we're doing with our vehicles, along with we continue to review our utilization studies to determine how many vehicles we actually need and getting vehicles out of our fleet.
Great. Yeah, I knew that was being talked about. I didn't know what the timeline was.
Yeah, we're looking at implementation in 22 and potentially some in 21.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Yep, that information was sent to the governing body when the committee invite, the agenda and so forth was sent. It was sent to all governing bodies, so look back in your email, you should find it. The initial proposal that came from Enterprise. Yeah.
Thank you. Just a couple other comments from looking over the changes that were proposed from the earlier meeting, that then additional projects were added. I don't know if you want written questions at a certain point. I don't want to go, I've got a number of them, but something that was a little disconcerting was it went up $2 million a year and there were less dollars contributed to street projects than there were before the revisions were made. And so and all of a sudden it was sort of like, wow, well, we can throw a bunch more in for traffic signals and we can throw a bunch more in for facilities. And it ended up unbalanced in terms of really adding dollars to street projects. My inclination is to look at that again about, if we've put off some of these reconstructions and added in mill and overlay, maybe we can still maintain our budget limit, would be a point to consider for all of you as my colleagues. A couple of the observations were, for instance, this one is small in terms of that big budget, but there's a $600,000 a year figure in for infill sidewalks. I was on the committees that ran that through. It's a little hard to see, but I went back and pulled out the PED plan to make sure I was right. I think that what happened was the pedestrian plan was supposed to be $500,000 a year for the whatever the neighborhoods were that were targeted for that particular year, and they were spelled out through the plan. And then there was to be $100,000 a year for infill sidewalks, which was a pre-existing line item that we had actually, and so they got put together so that, for instance, again, maybe if it had been itemized, we would have seen it, but I'm not sure we needed to add $100,000 for the California sidewalk if there was already supposed to be $100,000 that could flex in there. Because hopefully that was really helpful to have that flex sidewalk money. We've still kept the complete streets money as well that can flex with projects. So I was just kind of looking for whether we needed to add money or whether I had assumed that they would be already included.
If I could, Councilman? Yeah, the relative to the 100,000 for the sidewalk for California was added into the GEO bond, taking a number that was 500,000 in the initial proposal, raising it to 600,000 as it relates to sidewalks. So that's why we did that. And then if you look at future years, it went back to 500,000.
Okay.
So it was specifically put into that line item rather than calling it out as a separate line item since it relates to sidewalk. And the estimate's around 84,000 plus whatever engineering we have. We think it'll be around $100,000 to do that project.
Okay. I think the city manager and I had a conversation on Monday, and I referred him to Councilman Dobler just across the table, but the idea of another alternative for the increased balance in the debt service fund was to consider reestablishing the engineering fund so that we're not borrowing so early. One of the figures that was in our booklet was that the city, at the time the booklet was issued in late January, that we were carrying over $43 million in temp notes. And even at 1%, that's over $400,000 a year in interest. And so for me, I always want to keep doing as much as we can, but spend less money on it. And if there were ways that we were either not having to do temp notes or bond projects as early as we do, and that could start to produce us at least sidewalk money or alley repair money and so on. I certainly thought that if it was a timely time to figure out how, with the way the state's finance laws as well as the dollars that were needed, it was sort of a new process for city manager in terms of spending the engineering and then reimbursing it out of project funding. What used to happen, as I understand it, was that then if it was our own project, we'd bond it and pay ourselves back. But if it was a federal funded project or a state project, then we'd get the money back from that outside source and not have to bond it and so on. So it might be a good time to look at that, it seemed. Also, there was a project that now I can't remember exactly what it was, but it added $50,000 a year for trees to be installed. I wondered if in that project we were installing that, we were planting them ourselves, or whether we were buying. That sounded like a lot of trees every year for 5 years. So I encourage everybody to kind of comb through the language on that and see what's in there. I'm hoping that in yesterday's meeting, the issue of street sweeping got resolved. Because there were a lot of questions in the attachments on that, and in my neighborhoods, just noticed where they weren't. The report that you all had indicated that they weren't coming very often, and in my neighborhoods, especially with the leaf drop, it needs to be timely, and they need to give advance notice so people can get their cars out of the way. And so I'm hoping that you all made some progress on that. Okay. Great. That's all for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Also, I had a question in going through the book this past week. We have the SORT program still in here, and it looks like it's at the same level, or actually more than it has been in the past. And I was under the impression that we'd actually ended that program. We have a final neighborhood that has it right now, and then
Can I?
Sure. Oh.
There's a lot more to that story that really needs to be told, and we're really just at the beginning from the standpoint of that. The discussion was made that SORT as a program should be reconsidered. And so we as staff have been studying that request. There was a small group of individuals that brought a proposal forward. It went to the Citizen Advisory Council. They supported making the change. And so staff has been trying to figure out what does that look like in order to do a different kind of program that still helps the neighborhoods with infrastructure needs, allowing the possibility of, instead of a SORT grant going to one neighborhood, that the funding that has been provided in the past be allowed to be going to multiple neighborhoods, but in line with the same types of programs: streets, alleys, sidewalks, curb and gutter, that kind of stuff. potentially 5 neighborhoods might receive funding rather than just the one for SORT. I have some serious concerns about not still continuing to attack our intensive care neighborhoods with SORT. It has been effective. We've shown the numbers. The health of those neighborhoods improves after they receive SORT. And so we still feel there's value. So we're, as staff, analyzing what that looks like. The program is kept in the budget as SORT, but more than likely, as we go into the next budget, it would be called something different. Right now, it's called the DREAMS program. And so we would be looking at retitling that program and a future date. But for simplistic sake, for the budget, because those changes haven't been finalized, we're keeping it and calling it SORT with the anticipation that it's the same amount of funding, just used slightly differently as to how it's exercised in spending. And so we'll have that information probably done in the next few months as a proposal to bring forward. More than likely, I think it's probably one of those ones that goes to the public infrastructure so they understand what happens. And I can bring in the planning staff that has been implementing SORT for a long time and has shown over a 20-year history of its impact. So we got to be careful. We've got what looks like a successful program, but it may have run its course with regards to being an every year need. But we still have 6 intensive care neighborhoods. And so I think it still is a worthwhile program to help target after those.
Yeah, and Mr. Trout, thank you for that answer, and I agree it has been a valuable program. My issue with it has been it's kind of winner takes all, and it's, you have so many neighbors that have needs, but we only do, we do so much in one, and frankly, some of them, I think, sometimes have a hard time coming up with the infrastructure they need to.
Yeah, and that was part of the discussion recently. We had a neighborhood that was not intensive care, and there were neighborhoods that were wondering, well, why did SORT money go to a neighborhood that is in an outpatient, but the next level down. Anyway, that they were receiving the funding. But that was voted on by the CAC. The members agreed that they had the best application, and so that's why they received the funding. And so, but then that got some talking going on about what type of options should we be considering for future implementation of grants.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Looking at our Zoom colleague. Okay, thank you very much for all your comments. Seeing no one else signed up and no further in the chamber. And Taylor's making hand signals to him. We'll move on to announcements. If the clerk would read.
Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Did Mr. Emerson get my time to speak? I would like to comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to say in my comments that LEAP has extended their program to May the 28th of 2021 and expanded income limits to help more low to moderate income people and working people. And that's huge. That's really, really huge because usually they shut down March 31st. So we need to really, there's a lot of people out there still struggling, not only with food, but their utilities. So we really need to make sure that they know that. I also wanted to mention the Affordable Housing Fund. And the gentleman that came and spoke to us, I don't remember his name, I apologize for that. But the one thing that stuck in my mind was that he said, don't worry about how much we need to put in the fund, but just put in the fund. So tonight, I have a $100 bill. There's no money in the fund. This is my money. This is not any political money. This is my hard-earned money, and I'm going to put $100 in this fund. I'm going to give it to Jessica, and my money is going to be the first money because I'm serious about this fund, and I'm serious when I say it takes all of us. If all of us would just put a little bit in it, this is seed money. This is seed money. That means it's going to grow. I've challenged my colleagues, my friends, and even people that have businesses that make $1 million that's sitting in my seat. I challenge them, put money in this fund because we are all responsible for our brothers, our sisters, our brothers and sisters keeper. So I will be giving this. I will be looking for my receipt. And trust and believe, I don't have a lot of money floating around, but it's important to me to do this because I keep hearing that man say, it does not matter what's in the fund. It's just get it in the fund. We've got to get this wagon rolling. I also have something else under my belt. Hopefully with COVID lifting up, I can do that. It takes all of us to take time to work. We can sit up here, we can talk about what we're going to do, but we have to put our money where our mouth is. Jessica, is there any money in the fund?
There's not any money right now, but after
Jessica, I will get this to you. I will get this to you, Jessica, to start this fund rolling, to get this wagon rolling. It takes all of us. This is where we talk about it takes a village. And I'm going to start with this foundation. So I ask my colleagues, I ask everybody who's watching, you might not have but $10. So what? Let's get it started. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Ortiz. I apologize. I want to give an opportunity to Mr. Joe Ledbetter, who did sign up for public comment and maybe has $100 he wants to add to yours. So if he wants to step forward and take on that challenge.
Joe has it. Don't fool yourself. Joe has it.
You stole my thunder because I was actually going to do that. So I'm going to match you, Miss Ortiz, and I will give it to the city clerk. I don't have it on me. I mean, I can write a check. I'll give her cash. I'll get it here before your next meeting, probably in a couple days or tomorrow. All right. So I do. I'll actually agree with the manager on one thing. I actually do agree with these SORT programs for the intensive care areas. I know that the last time when I was president over at Highcrest, we got one in it was 14, but we finally got the money in 17. That's kind of how these work for that intensive care area. And we did Fremont Hill. That was the choice of the neighborhood. I kind of lobbied for that as well. And what a remarkable street compared to what it once was. Some of you went to that ribbon cutting in November of 17. It's remarkable. I'm going to go back to this bid item. And if I didn't already have some proof, I wouldn't have said what I said earlier. So I'm going to leave it at that. I've already filed the cores. They're of record now. I did it from my iPhone. I'm looking for certain documentation on certain size contracts. And then we'll have a discussion. And we'll see who's right. And this isn't about a challenge. Let me tell you this. This isn't about personalities. I didn't come down here to argue with anybody. I am concerned for this city. I'm concerned about our fiduciary duties being followed, our oversight duties. And some of you had the audacity to put me on the Metropolitan Transit Authority, and I've learned some things over there. Now, I learned a lot in law school about business associations and boards and how they operate, and I've learned a lot through the MPA program, and I've learned a lot watching this council and working with the council and commissioners. But you can never stop learning if you're one of those kind of people, and I'm one of them. I love to learn. So I can see a better process, I'm going to bring it up. And I've done that watching them for over a year and participating in those processes. And I like the way they're done. They're simple. They have a summary on these bids. And I'm concerned for the sake of transparency that we are making sure anybody, Joe Ledbetter or Neil Dobler or Mike Lesser or anybody in the public that wants to ask a question, they get a very prompt answer. Oh yeah, here it is. This is what we did. Here's who won the bid. Here's the dollar amounts. And I especially have to go back to my CIP comments. For God's sakes, we have got to stop setting our public up and this council and future councils that we are signing on a budget, but we don't know what's in it till we get there 5 years from now. So just pass it and we'll eventually find out what's in it 5 years from now. And these numbers have all changed and the scope of the project has changed. And some of them nobody would have dreamed of. And I know they wouldn't have. I've seen some of them. And I just have to emphasize, for the sake of our citizens and all their hard-earned money, like Sylvia, that we make sure that this money is all well accounted for. I'm impressed with how the county makes all these contracts get cleared with the counselor's office, their legal arm, and they all have to be approved. And I thought maybe that was a little bit too much minutia, but I'd rather be on the safe side with public money, following that standard, than over here where people are seeing large amounts of money and they're not sure what went on and when that was passed and what is it, and I just don't want that anymore. So that's why I've gotten so involved in this. Thank you for your time and have a good evening. And you'll get that, okay? Very promptly.
Thank you for your comments, Joe, and your donation of record. Okay, we'll move on now to the announcements.
There is no agenda for the next 2 weeks, so.
Okay.
No meeting.
If you will start us off wherever we need to start. Is it Neil?
I don't have
City
anything
Manager?
tonight. I don't have anything tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Said enough.
First time around? Neil.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to announce that I did file for District 7 last week, so I will be running for formal election to this body, and I look forward to the race. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I can contribute. I spent most of my money, was established earlier this year, on fire detectors for my house. But I will gladly start putting some more aside and donate also to the Housing Trust Fund. So I just had one announcement. We have, as many people know, many boards that serve the city of Topeka with citizens, and many of them have openings right now, which you can look on the website. One of those that could use some people is, as I talk about often, the Topeka Performing Arts Center. TPAC, they've got 2 openings, which are city appointees out of 4. So if you are interested, let me know, and we can appoint you to that board. So I just wanted to put that out there. With that, thank you very much.
I don't have much either. I guess I'll piggyback on Mr. Dobler's. I too, last Monday, filed for re-election. I look forward to the opportunity, hopefully, to earn my constituents' vote to finish some work that I still want to do. Apparently, since we aren't Proud Boys or anything like that, we don't get an announcement letting us know that we filed in the newspaper, but if there is one still. I'm looking forward to serving my constituents again, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Keller?
Hopefully you both will get the banner front page. Get your pictures taken. Just wanted to do 2 things. One, in response to Mr. Ledbetter's comments, I don't think he's here anymore, but the council used to do project approvals, and it really didn't take very long. I think one of the reasons they got backed out of the agenda was the idea of time, but unless people had questions or there had been changes, I don't recall them really taking very long, for what that's worth. Otherwise, happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. I will miss the parades and the festivities that we always have. I know there have been some virtual and alternate celebrations, but that's always been one of the high points of our community engagements. And so Again, best wishes to everybody for a great day tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to have parades and get out and about again next year. Thank you.
Councilmember Valdivia Akala.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Several announcements to make. On March 21st, sending a shout out to Oakland people in District 2. On March 21st at 1 p.m., we break sod on the Oakland Garden, a community of growers. The Facebook page has gone up, and we have 12 solid volunteers, and we are looking for trucks, wheelbarrows, shovels, anything else. People can come and help, bring their gloves, something to drink. And we're very excited about this. So that will be at 1020 Northeast Forest, which is now the Community Resource Council, Part 2. And hope we can get a good bunch of folks out there to start this vision that so many have for a sustainable, ongoing, volunteer-driven community garden. Also, on March 28th, wanted to remind folks that I'll be having a meeting at the Community Resource Center gym at 2 p.m. to discuss the ongoing issues that we're having with drug houses and to talk about neighborhood watch, etc. Also, wanting to remind District 2 this coming Thursday, and to all Topekans, this coming Thursday at 6 p.m. will be a fire commission meeting, and hope that folks can tune in. And also, I just wanted to say, I think it's a very good idea what Councilwoman Ortiz is saying. We should all be thinking about ponying up, boys and girls. I'm going to match her amount, raise it $50, so that'll be $150 that I'll be giving to the housing. Heaven only knows this city needs it and needs to start looking at it seriously. So I would just say, pony up, colleagues, if you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ortiz?
She had hers.
You want to do a redo?
No, I'm good. I thought Tony talked for me, and I will not have that.
Well, Councilmember Emerson, I see he's busy over here.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. First of all, I want everyone to check the batteries in their smoke detectors. That's something I feel like has to be said from the seat. But I will, only because I haven't been home yet and my kids have not gotten all my money. So Councilmember Ortiz, I will match your $100. And, well, I'll give it to our city clerk here. So I'll see her and Steve out probably for dinner tomorrow night. So with our money, but we'll see. But I think it's a great idea, kind of putting our money where our mouths are. So I did want to thank, code enforcement gets a lot of grief, and it's a tough job. It's one of those jobs where nobody's happy, right? I mean, if you're calling them to say your neighbor's house is a mess, you're not happy. And then when they go out there, when they have to write a citation to that neighbor, they're not happy. It's a tough job these guys have, these men and women have. So last Friday, I got a kind of a panic call from a constituent, and she had a deal where a trash service, and I don't know if it was county or a private trash service, they'd went over and in the process of loading up a bunch of trash, they'd ripped open a couple of the bags, and there was trash strewn throughout the neighborhood. If you guys recall, there's it's been windy here too. So I got a hold of Mike Haugen over there in code enforcement, and he and John Chardine and Heather Augustine, they got a crew out there that afternoon and got a lot of that mitigated. So, at 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, I mean, getting people out there quickly to clean up something is
damn impressive in my book. So I really appreciate their service, and like I said, they do a very, very tough job through difficult circumstances. So thanks a lot, guys. Job well done.
Thank you. I don't have a lot. I just do want to thank Mayor De La Isa for sticking it out as long as she did on tonight's meeting. I know she's under the weather. I ask that we all hope for her quick recovery, and I believe we can move on now to an executive session. Or do you need? No. Okay.
Nager.
Hannah? Oh, I didn't see your hand up. Oh, I'm sorry. I tell you, I'll be glad when we're all in one room.
Deputy Mayor, I didn't actually have anything until Councilwoman Ortiz challenged us, so I'll meet that challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay now, Mike? I tell you, I'll be glad when we're all in one room again.
I heard her count it and say.
Okay, now, if we may.
Executive session.
Executive session.
Yes.
City Attorney, would you read for us, please?
The motion is to recess into executive session for a period of time not to exceed 60 minutes to discuss upcoming employer-employee negotiations as justified by KSA 75-4319B3. In order to aid the discussion, the following individuals should be present: members of the governing body, City Manager Brent Trout, Chief of Staff Bill Cochran, Administrative and Financial Services Director Jessica Lamondola, Human Resources Director Jackie Russell, Interim Police Chief Brian Wheelis, Senior Assistant City Attorney Catherine Walter, Budget and Performance Managers Stephen Wade, and myself. No action is anticipated to be taken when the open meeting resumes in the governing body chambers.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of the body?
Motion approved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Brenda, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Emerson.
Yes.
Padilla.
Yes.
Nager.
Yes.
Dobler.
Yes.
Duncan.
Yes.
Lesser.
Yes.
Hiller.
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila.
Yes.
Ortiz.
Yes.
We have 9 yes. Motion carries.
Okay. And Taylor, we'll wait until the gallery is clear.
Do we get a little break?
Yeah. Okay, we are coming out of executive session. There being no further business for this body, this meeting is adjourned.